All right. Hey, folks, we are just getting started here on this sunny Tuesday where I am. I hope it is feeling like spring for all of you after a holiday weekend. And what we'll do is we'll pull up some slides and we will also stream on Facebook Live. So if for any reason you get disconnected or for those of our participants who prefer to join on Facebook Live, we will be live streaming there too, and a recording will be made available after for participants as well. So we really appreciate you guys joining us today. We'll have a great half hour set aside for this conversation and can have you submitting questions as they come to mind. But we've also gotten a whole bunch of questions from folks during the sign up process. So we have added those to a slide at the end that we'll get to. Great. So let's go ahead and dive in just a little bit more about DPAC. If this is your first time joining us, this is part of our Brown Bag series. And this is a chance for us to really dive into a singular topic. A lot of times it's a topic that is maybe in the media, it may be something that you've heard about, but you've expressed to us that you'd like to learn more about. In some of our other events, we do, for instance, we go to the States and have forums that are really tailored to that individual spot. And then also we do a lot with Congress as well. So this is a chance for us in all those events when we fly through the issues, because there are so many that are pertinent to the diabetes community. This is a chance for us to take a deep breath and really slow down and dive into one issue in particular. So we're excited today to discuss insulin affordability, some recent announcements that have been made and what the landscape really looks like. But again, if you're joining us for the first time, we encourage you to follow us on social media, sign up to get our updates, because our goal is to make advocacy easy for you. So we will send you alerts when there is a chance to be active in your state or in Congress at a key time when there's legislation that's impacting the diabetes community at large. We also work again with those members of Congress and state legislatures directly to help ensure that their focus continues to stay on constituents and people with diabetes. Next slide, please. So I'm going to introduce Erica Emerson, who is joining me today and going to be giving a lot of today's presentation. Erica is part of our sister organization, the Diabetes Leadership Council. They are kind of the policy side to the advocacy, to our advocacy work. So it's really two sides of the same coin. We work hand in glove, and it's been really great to have Erica, who has decades of policy experience, particularly in diabetes advocacy, with us today. So thanks so much, Erica, for joining us, and I would like you to take it away.
All right, thank you. And thank you everyone for joining us today. If we could jump to the next slide, please, Jacob. In the news, what brings us all here today? So the news actually has been pretty hard to miss in the diabetes community, but just so we're all up to speed, last month, over a series of just a couple of weeks, the three largest insulin manufacturers, Eli Lilly, Novo, and Sanofi, all made some major announcements related to insulin pricing and their patient assistance programs, primarily some significant reductions in list price for some of their most commonly prescribed insulins, and some, in a couple cases, enhancements to their prescription assistance program. It really is very exciting news for the diabetes community, and frankly, the latest in a series of encouraging news for the diabetes community that we hope sort of rings in a new era in insulin affordability and access in the US. But we also know there are a lot of kind of tiny details or really some exciting news that we want to make sure that you have the information you need to make the right choices for yourself and for your family. So we're going to jump right in. We got some of your questions ahead of time, but again, as questions come up, we want to make sure you have the information you need. So make sure you put those in the chat and we will get to them as best we can. All right. As our friend Lizzo says, it's about damn time. This has been a long time coming for the advocacy community. Sorry, Julie, did you say something?
Yeah, I just said leave it to Lizzo. Go ahead.
Leave leave it to Lizzo. We can go ahead and jump to the next slide, Jacob. That will get us into some of the details. But as advocates, this is a time where it probably is okay to just stop and give a round of applause or a pat on the back if you've ever advocated for insulin access for yourself or someone else. Change is really starting to happen. We are going to look at some of the changes that you see here. They are not necessarily insulin price reductions for all insulins, but again, these are insulins that are really very commonly prescribed, are subject to a lot of competition, which means if you joined us before when we talk about PBMs or rebates, these are the products for which the spread or the gap between the list price, which you see on the left, and the net cost, or what the manufacturer would actually get, has been the biggest, in some cases 80% or even more. So what that means is now that we have a little more transparency into what these products have actually been costing, we get to see how much middlemen in the system have been making off of insulin. So again, this is a dysfunction of our entire supply chain. And what the manufacturers did was kind of burst that bubble. So they, in some places, they talk about the list to net or gross to net bubble. That bubble has burst for these insulins that you see here. So we hope to see a reduction in the list price, which then translates to a reduction in what patients actually pay at the pharmacy. Because for most of us, that's really what matters most, is can you afford to go to the prescription and or go to the pharmacy and pick up the insulin that you need? So again, we are seeing now new products. We are seeing, for example, Resviglar, which was a product from Lilly that was approved many, many months ago, but hadn't been released yet. That is a biosimilar to Lantus. So that is a new product. Relion, Humulin, those are the older human insulin. So we might not spend as much time on those because we think most people here are interested in learning about kind of the newer insulins. Why don't we jump to the next slide, Jacob, and we'll kind of dig into what all of this means and try and answer questions. So for our first question, my insulin is still expensive. What are some of my options? At this point, it really might be, it depends. For some of these changes, they've not yet gone into effect. Some, for example, Lilly's started on March 1st. I believe Resviglar is launching or has recently launched, and they're making some of the changes to their programs this year. The Novo and Sanofi programs, for the most part, will kick into effect on January 1st. So if you're using any of those insulins and you're still seeing some high prices, what you might be finding is you'll want to go direct to the manufacturer to get those discounts. Or again, look outside your insurance to get the lowest price you can for the insulin that you need. And that might include the original brand. Again, if you're used to using Lantus, Humalog, or Novolog, or what you want to be looking for is authorized generics or unbranded versions of those. We'll get into what that unbranded and branded means. Again, these are the same insulins in kind of different packaging with different prices. So ultimately, you want to get the insulin that is the lowest price for you and your family. Let me just go through my notes and make sure that we're catching everything. Because again, we know that everybody's insurance is different. So a lot of the variation that you might see could depend on which insulin you are being prescribed, how it is covered on your formulary, the source for your insurance, and the plan you select. And quite frankly, even at a more logistical or tactical angle that I think for a lot of people in the diabetes community haven't had to think about, as we get more and more insulin options, the fridges at the pharmacy don't get any bigger. So in some cases, you might now start seeing that you have been prescribed one insulin. It might not be in stock. Doesn't mean they can't get it, but it could either mean that they will give you an equivalent one that is in stock, or you might have to come back in a day once that pharmacy, again, replenishes its stock all of these insulins are available. There are no shortages that we are aware of. But again, with this radical change in the environment, there's going to be a learning curve for everyone, including your pharmacy. So again, within the diabetes community, we are doing as everything we can to make sure we're getting accurate information out there. Starting with this briefing, but at the end of our presentation and Q&A, we'll make sure that we have some sources for you to make sure, again, you are getting accurate information in this radically changing and very exciting environment.
Yeah, Erica, worth mentioning too, because we've had some questions come in about, this just is purely the price and the cost of insulin. It's, obviously there are things like non-medical switching where you mentioned you go and you want to have the insulin that's prescribed to you. And sometimes there's a note from your insurance company saying that that's no longer covered.
Yes.
So there's still lots of that piece on the right there that your insurance plan has the final say is just important to remember as some of these changes are taking place. Even that last piece there, that last bullet on the biosimilars, authorized generics, are those options being more widely available, but the coverage gaps are remaining. And those are issues that we continue to work on. We've got questions about as well, just the types of insulin. For instance, does this apply to quick pens, Erica?
Sorry, I didn't catch to.
Yeah, to quick pens was the question on Facebook Live.
Oh, okay. If Jacob, if you go back to the previous slide. So here are by and large the products that are seeing the reduced list price. So if there is a pen and a vial version of the two of these, some of them only have a pen version, then yes, this price would apply to that box. But one of the interesting points is between, frankly, now and even into 2024, all of these manufacturers, in addition to Mylan, which is the manufacturer of Semglee and its biosimilar insulin glargine, I hope I pronounced that correct. All of these manufacturers have capped options now, where if you go to their website, you can generally get a voucher, or in some cases, it might show up right at the pharmacy, where you can get a month's supply of any of their insulins in whatever form, whatever has been prescribed, for a flat, low rate. With these recent announcements, they tend to be between $0 and $35. But I will say too, I've been very, frankly, impressed with how much easier they have gotten to access. For example, I went to Lilly's website last week and was able to do click, click, and get a pharmacy voucher. And it told me that I probably wouldn't need it at the pharmacy, but it was great to have it. Again, if you're one of those sort of belt and suspenders people and you want to make sure that the coupon is readily available. So again, a lot of these prices or changes aren't going to come to you, depending on your insurance or what have you. So what we're trying to do is give you the tools you need to, frankly, sniff out the best prices, again, for you and your family.
And I think we're ready for
Yes. So let's just, I think there's been a lot of confusion too about this branded and unbranded insulin, or branded insulin and authorized generic. What we have here, again, just like superheroes, you're either Peter Parker or Spider-Man, it's the same stuff in a different suit. So this really is a dysfunction of our prescription drug system, which is pretty messed up. But for example, when we look at a branded insulin and an unbranded insulin, that branded insulin tends to be one that has a higher list price and bigger rebates. So that's the money that goes to the middlemen in the system. Unbranded insulin tends to have a lower starting price point and a lower rebate. So again, it just takes a lot of that fluff out of the system and gets you a lower price on the same insulin. So that really is it's a dysfunction of our system that Mylan came out with a low list price insulin and couldn't get it on formularies because the insurance companies didn't want to cover it. And they had to release a second version, their interchangeable version, that has, again, a higher list price and higher rebates. So looking at these changes in front of us in the system, we're really encouraged to see again this movement toward those lower list price versions, because that's really what's best for patients.
Yeah.
So Julie, before we jump into these, do you want to toss out any questions from Facebook Live or the chat, or should we just jump in here?
No, I think jumping in here is great and helping folks to really, dig through, some of just more of the meat around these announcements and what it means. Okay. So it's great.
All right. So how can I access these reduced prices? Kind of depends on, again, the manufacturer and your insurance. But by and large, you either, in the case of Lilly, can access them directly at the pharmacy, or you can go to the manufacturer website. If you don't know the manufacturer of your insulin, you can't keep it straight or what's on the box, you also can go to getinsulin.org. Again, that's getinsulin.org. That is sort of a single point of access for all of the manufacturer programs, again, to kind of help you find what you need quickly without having to go all over the internet.
And
why did they drop the? Oh,
I was just going to say, ahead of this question, why did they drop the prices now? Can you give some extra context on these announcements, what they were? Got a question here from folks who may not have totally seen or understood the announcement and exactly what those were.
Okay. So the announcements themselves were reductions in, again, the sticker price for certain insulins, not all insulins, but certain insulins, commonly prescribed ones. That means the retail price has dropped for those insulins, either now, in the case of Lilly, which has made those announcements effective immediately, or for Novo and Sanofi, those changes will take effect on January 1st, 2024. So are there more? I'm not sure if there are more specific questions. If we can pull up that kind of pricing slide, but I think for now, let's try and get through the rest of these questions, and then we can always circle back and just keep taking those questions for as long as we have time.
I think that's great. So why did the prices drop now?
It really is a combination of factors. We do think that advocacy really has played an important role. We like to think that anyway. This has been a long time coming. It's been a concerted effort across the diabetes community for a very long time. But the reality is too, this is very much reflective of sort of the mature market. These products have been around for a really long time, and they've been subject to a lot of competition. So over time, we're really seeing what we kind of expect to see, where we have older products, and then as they go off patent, we start to see lower priced generics for prescription drugs, but in this case, biosimilars. So duplicates, similar products to those innovator insulins. And again, those more options mean more, lower prices for patients. So that's very good. So again, we have that mature market. What has changed, though, is a lot of times that competition hasn't actually benefited patients. It has been benefiting intermediaries in the prescription drug chain. So again, with these announcements of lower list prices, that starts the cascade that will benefit patients. And finally, on the legislative front, there were some federal changes in the law, in, I believe, the America's Rescue Plan Act, the Inflation Reduction Act. Those really affect sort of prices in Medicaid or Medicaid rebates that are not as favorable to manufacturers, I guess. So they've started to make these changes now so they don't get dinged later under these new laws. So, again, we don't sit at the table with the manufacturers. So those prices or those decisions, I'm sure, are proprietary. But I think, again, the combination of advocacy, mature markets, and competition in that market, we're pleased to see, again, these changes starting to benefit patients directly.
No, that's true. Some of those changes in law, again, come from good advocacy that actually drove manufacturers to make these decisions as well. you know,
Exactly.
as they may have priced that out or worked that on the back end.
Exactly.
But there's also, you know, in Medicare last year and through the Inflation Reduction Act, making insulin $35 the default and not the exception or the sometimes, because that was a piloted program. So
Exactly.
there's been so much attention and so much policy change, putting pressure on really on all players in the system to do the right thing and to make the moves that they are making, you know, in the patient's best interest, and to try to align those with some of maybe the internal decisions that some of these other folks make as well. But
Mhm.
the good news for patients is, you know, things are headed in the right direction.
Exactly. Very much heading in the right direction, which as advocates is always so encouraging. Does this apply to all insulin types? I think we already covered that one. But again, just to double down and make sure everybody understands, it is just on those insulins that were listed in the previous slide, or we'll make, again, some sort of tighter synopses available on the Diabetes Leadership Council website, that kind of gets into more of the ticky-tackies. But again, it's a series of both branded and unbranded insulins, vial and pen, that are available at these lower list prices, again, sometimes effective now or January 1st. Or again, if your insulin, your preferred insulin is not among these kind of chosen few, and if you're not in a position to switch to them, then your best option, quite frankly, if your insurance isn't great, is to go directly to those manufacturer assistance programs, where you're likely to be able to get sort of capped access to, again, the full array or the full offerings of those manufacturers.
Yeah. So next question is, why just insulin?
Great question. I'm not sure I have the answer to that, quite frankly. I think part of it, again, goes back to the influence of advocacy, and just, it has been a drumbeat for a very long time that has finally just now started to get the attention of policymakers. States really have been at the forefront, passing a lot of those monthly cost caps. We were successful in getting part of a federal cap just last year. We still will be working on getting a federal cost cap that applies to everybody. But insulin really has been kind of almost a poster child, for lack of a better word, for how broken our prescription drug system has become. It's an egregious example because it's a medication that people need to survive. And instead of making sure that patients had affordable access to it for free or low predictable costs, it just became sort of a money-making venture of, all the people, all the different intermediaries in the system, to make money or take money out of patients' pockets to line their own.
Definitely.
Yeah.
And when we talked about all insulin types and just insulin, we've got a good question from a participant that says, why not, CGMs and pumps? And it seems like that's the next frontier that states are really trying to tackle, because fortunately patients have done a good job of sounding the alarm that it's not just insulin that people with diabetes need.
Yeah.
There's a lot to this equation, but I wanted to ask you that, Erica.
Absolutely. Well, if you've been hanging around with the Diabetes Leadership Council or DPAC for any amount of time, you know that our drumbeat has been diabetes management is preventive care. So quite frankly, all of these things should be covered as preventive. And that means no deductible and zero or very low predictable cost sharing, because we know when people with diabetes have access to the tools they need, their health is better and their overall health costs are lower. So as a diabetes community, that's where we've been pushing. But again, I think because insulin has been so distorted in pricing by our system, we're tackling that, but we've never taken our eye off of making sure that we have low predictable cost sharing for whatever medication and supplies that you need for your diabetes. 2 states, I believe, have instituted caps for CGM pumps and supplies. So we would love to see the other 48 states pick that up as well. I think we might have jumped over part of the congressional cap. So if we can just kind of jump back to that before we start again going through the chat and just make sure that people understand what it is and what it isn't. We were very excited to see that cost cap pass in, I believe, the Inflation Reduction Act. It wasn't the full cap that we were pushing for. We wanted to make sure that all people with diabetes had that cap, whether they were in a federal program or an exchange plan or a commercial plan. So we're still working on it. But within Medicare, Part D is the prescription drug benefit. That cap is in place now. So if you are a Medicare beneficiary and you have a Part D plan, you just want to make sure that you are, when you choose your plan, you are choosing a plan that actually caps the insulins that you need. So again, that is in effect as of, I believe, January 1. So very exciting and very helpful for Medicare beneficiaries with diabetes. In Medicare Part B, that is insulin that's used in pumps. That takes place later this year, I believe, January 1st. And the way these caps work are, again, thanks to advocacy, we think they're how we wanted them to work, which is a $35 a month cap isn't per vial or what have you. It is a month's supply of a particular insulin. So for example, if you use 2 different insulins, your cost cap would be $70, regardless of quantity. If you use, 1 vial or 4 vials, it's a $35 cap per insulin prescription. So wonderful for Medicare beneficiaries. And again, something that we would love all people to have diabetes access to.
And I think that's been the distinction that folks are making too. We've got a question on Facebook Live about this. There's the announcements we spoke about at the beginning and the $35 congressional cap. And what if that applies inside Medicare only? And what if that applies outside of Medicare?
So the $35 congressional cap, or I shouldn't call it the congressional cap, that passed in the Inflation Reduction Act. That is legislative. That is, again, for Part D already in effect. And for Part B will be in effect later this year. Those just apply in the Medicare program, which is the federal healthcare program for seniors and Americans who are disabled. So that, quite frankly, is really a bellwether for a lot of other plans. But what that doesn't include is, for example, if you work for a large employer, those are covered under a different federal law called ERISA. We won't go into what the acronym means, but that's really where about half or more of Americans get their health insurance. That is a different set of laws at the federal level that, again, we are working to get an insulin cost cap in those. That's what we're working toward now, but we're not quite there yet. And finally, you might get your insurance through a state regulated plan. If you're a state employee, if you get your health benefits from the state exchanges, the Affordable Care Act exchanges, or other state regulated health plans, then it might be up to whether or not you live in one of the 20 plus states that now has an insulin cost cap in place.
So the conversation that we've had today about the price changing, is there anyone that's changed for outside of Medicare?
Not federally, no.
Right.
But again, there have been a number of advancements at the state level that would require those caps. And quite frankly, in a lot of health plans, we're also seeing more employers actually opt to reduce insulin cost sharing or eliminate it entirely, which again, this whole movement toward more affordable insulin is very helpful.
Yes, I just wanted to make sure we've got that question. I've gotten it from a couple messages and also on Facebook Live. So I wanted to make sure we clarify that.
Yes.
As well as going, some of those manufacturers saying across the board, reductions and using their plans and their assistance programs specifically to get the insulin mean that those who can benefit from its impact
Yes.
are better.
That's a really good point. And again, as these changes kind of take hold in the system, a lot of this is going to be gradual. So what you might find if your insurance isn't maybe the best, and you're still seeing those really high prices for insulin, you might want to look around. For a lot of these products, it might be less expensive for you to go outside of your insurance to get your insulin, again, through either a manufacturer program, through some of, you've got Amazon Pharmacy. You have one of our favorite now disruptors in the marketplace is Mark Cuban's Cost Plus Drugs. They're piloting an affordable insulin program. So there's lots of exciting changes happening in this space. Might make it a little bit harder for people to find what works best for them, but boy, it's always better to have more options than fewer.
That's very well said. And I know we sort of hit on the cost of other medications and supplies earlier. So since we're close to time, I didn't want to jump back into that. But we did have a question on which 2 states were the ones where the supply caps had passed. Do you know that off the top of your head?
Oh, I do. I'm not looking off in the space. I'm just pulling up. I was working on a map the other day. I believe it was Connecticut. And there was one more in the Northeast.
Okay. Well,
Julie, entertain the troops, and I will pull that up because I don't want to give people the wrong information.
No, I appreciate that. And I appreciate you making sure that we double check that, and making sure that we've answered as many questions as possible that we've gotten as well on Facebook, just checking that. But obviously, go ahead, Erica.
Oh, I got it. Okay. So the 2 states where there are cost caps in place for diabetes devices and supplies is Connecticut, that has $100 cap. Delaware has a $35 cap, and the District of Columbia has a $100 cap.
Okay, great. And again, that's something that we have to, as advocates, continue working for, especially because as many of you are pointing out in your questions directly to me and in your comments on Facebook and to the group, is, as changes in the state they're also limited in who they apply to, right? The population is limited.
Exactly.
And the population that Congress can impact or has chosen to impact so far is also limited.
Yes.
And we're excited that net is getting wider. And even like Erica said, even some employers individually through the DLC Employer Initiative that are learning about just the return on investment of investing in their people.
Is. Yeah, I mean, preventive care is an investment. It's an investment. You're spending your money to get your employees access to the care they need, instead of spending a whole lot of money on prior authorizations and skinny formularies and other things that really keep essential care out of patients' hands. It's a much better system for everybody.
Yes. Well, I want to be mindful of everyone's time. You can if you've got any more questions or we didn't get to your question, I do see a couple here that just popped in. If you want to email us at info@diabetespac.org, we can certainly get to that. Erica, I'll let you touch on this slide and then I'll let you close out.
All right. So again, at this point, there is help available. So think about this, kind of like an oxygen mask on the airplane. Make sure that you have affordable access to insulin. Help is available. Getinsulin.org is a good starting place for all of the manufacturer programs. But if you see the 3rd bullet down, DLC resources to reduce insulin costs, that is a handout in a section of our website that we will update with these latest announcements. But that has a number of steps that you can take to really help you kind of troubleshoot if your insulin costs are high, where you might be able to try some different steps or tools or different places to look to, again, make sure that you have affordable access to insulin. And I would say once you have your insulin access or insulin supply secure, that's when we want you to reach out and actually advocate on behalf of those who can't. We do think now, particularly with a lot of people at risk of losing their Medicaid coverage over the next year or so, there could be a lot of people within the diabetes community who aren't aware and might be at risk of rationing. So again, if you have friends and family who need insulin, just make sure that we're looking out for one another. The rest of those tools really are resources from across the diabetes community to help you understand your insurance costs, help you pick the right health insurance plan. And in the case of JDRF, they're working on tools and actually have a number of tools to help you advocate with your HR or employee benefits person at your work. If you get your insurance through your employer, we found in our work with employers that they don't have bad diabetes coverage because they want to. They might have it because they don't know any better. It's as much as this is a confusing system for patients, it's confusing for employers as well. So a lot of times when they understand diabetes better, that helps them improve their diabetes coverage.
Definitely. That's a good note. And one final note here to follow us along for all the latest updates and events that we've got going on. We hope this added some clarity to the recent announcements and just frankly, the changing landscape. It is a lot to keep up with, and that's what we're here for, is to hopefully make it easier to understand. And also, you know, how are you individually, as well as the entire community, going to benefit? So thank you so much for joining us and for taking time. And again, if you've got questions that we didn't get to, info@diabetespac.org. We're happy to answer them. Thank you so much for your advocacy, for taking time to learn more, and we will see you soon.
Thank you.